Good morning. I am Pastor Hector Herrera, and I am the current associate pastor at Tokyo Union Church. We just heard an important history of TUC from Pastor Steve, who was an assistant pastor during the 80s. And ever since 1959, Tokyo Union Church has had an assistant or associate pastor, and there has only been 28 of them. And during the Meet, Pray, Love event, you will hear from 9 former assistant or associate pastors. During this half hour, we have the opportunity to hear from 3 of them. Pastor Barbara Shaw Jenkins, who was serving in the 70s, Pastor Craig Hunter in the early aughts, and Pastor Gail Muntz in the 2010s. So I will ask all of you here to please both briefly introduce yourself and reflect on one important memory during your time at Tokyo Union Church. It's open. Anyone and everyone's welcome to share.
Well, I'm Tokyo Union Church was my first ministry position out of seminary, so it deeply impacted my life and my ministry. And the senior pastor at the time was Dr. David McDowell, and he shaped me as a pastor, I think, because he was a very accomplished man. He was older, and he always told me, do everything you can do, Barbara. And if you run into any trouble, I'll back you up. and that was great. I felt very free to be creative, in ministry there. All my memories are wonderful, but building the new church was a tremendous experience, a learning experience. And it makes me think a little bit of the time now, because we worshiped as a congregation in 4 different places. And it was quite a feat, keeping our congregation together. And we pastors just work from our home. And so that stands out in my memory.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara. Anyone else?
Well, for me as well, the position as an associate pastor at TUC, I was there from 2003 to 2005, and it was also my first position at a seminary. And although I had actually spent a semester studying in Japan in college, and so it was not my first time in Japan. But as I look back on those years, which it's hard to believe, it's been 17 years since I left. It blows my mind. I miss the diversity of the congregation. Because I think it's one of I always feel like TUC, it's like, this is what Pentecost is. This is what World Communion Sunday is. It like preaches itself on those days in particular. And, that kind of diversity is rare. And I think it's a gift. As I look back on those years, I'm particularly grateful for several of the relationships that I had, some of the memories of specific individuals, Paul Fukuda and Suresh and Jean Pengosro and Mary Foster and many others. And then I led a couple study travel trips while I was there to Turkey and to Israel, Palestine, where we spent a time studying before we went. And because that was a couple weeks of really spending a lot of time together, that was just a particularly rich time. And both in those trips and at my time at TUC in general, it was a lot of fun, and there is something to be said for spirituality of fun. I mean, it's not the only thing, but fun is an important piece. I think Jesus had a sense of humor, and so being able to laugh and fun was a gift from of my time there.
I'm very sympathetic with that. So thank you so much, Craig. Yes, and Gail.
Yes, I served there. Well, I came with Randy, my husband. He was the intentional interim senior pastor. And so we were there from 2011. I was there until 2014. And we have so many warm and fabulous memories of our time together and with all the folks there. We had the privilege and blessing of living in that beautiful manse. And just yesterday on Facebook, a memory popped up of where I was telling about all the people that had been over and had brought food from all different countries. And there had been fabulous music at church and then fabulous music in the house, in the home. And we opened up the manse a lot to church people for hospitality and for evangelism, because for people to be invited into the senior pastor's home was an honor. And we wanted to honor them by opening up. So we had a lot of fun cookouts and meals and good times there. Another memory is Randy and I standing at the elevator and by the stairs, and you can hear on all the floors, you can hear praying and singing and different languages and laughter and conversation. And that was such a blessing to just be standing there and feel the Holy Spirit going through the building and touching lives and touching ours. My daughter, Katrina, well, all my children visited, but Katrina wanted to express her gratitude for Moan and for being a part of the homeless ministry, that working on the food to share with those experiencing homelessness. It changed her life. She continues to work with those experiencing homelessness in Seattle, Washington. She runs a hygiene facility which provides laundry and showers for those experiencing homelessness. And it started with her being at TUC and experiencing the Moan ministry. So, and one more, I could go on, and I share these in my sermon with people, is watching the elders serve communion and pray over people. And the times they prayed over us, and Suresh praying over me and my family so many times. And I cherish those memories as well, too. So, of course, I was ordained into Tokyo Union Church. So it had to be approved by the whole Council of Bishops, because that wasn't done at that time. You're to be called to a local ministry. And so thankfully, my bishop came from Global Missions, and so helped that happen. So very special that it was 9 years ago that I was ordained into ministry at TUC. So yeah, a lot of great memories, a lot of blessings.
Amazing. So the question I want to open up to everyone is, how has serving Tokyo Union Church shaped your ministry? How has it shaped it? We have not heard where y'all are from or where you guys are currently. We know that you were in Tokyo. Where are you guys now? And how has your time and experience at TUC shaped you and your ministry that you have done or are doing?
Well, I came from Tokyo to New Jersey and the Presbytery of Newark, and it was a real neck jerk. The first church I served, I was an associate, a big, wealthy church. And as you know, at TUC, members of committees, leaders of committees, they do what they say they're going to do. Well, at this big, wealthy church, even the elder chair of one committee I staffed, month after month, he would come and he hadn't done anything that he said he was going to do. And that was a tremendous eye opener to me. And I realized, okay, Barbara, this is a different ball game. And the other thing that was a neck jerk, people here all talked about my church, my church, my church. And we never used that language at Tokyo Union Church, ever. And it was our church. And be that pastors or whoever, everybody in the church, it was our church. So that was a neck jerk too. But it shaped my ministry in terms of looking for the good in people. That was what I learned at TUC, that everybody is good if you look for in them and try to bring that to the fore in their lives and help them work from their strengths. And so that is what I've always done as a pastor.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah.
I left TUC and then came a little over a year later to Denton, Texas, which was not a part of the country that I'd never heard of Denton, and I'm not from Texas or even this area. And it was called to a Presbyterian church here. I'm Presbyterian, and I'm a solo pastor here, and I've been here 15 years now. So, which is a long time, and enough that I've seen most of my other peers in the city, retire or move or transition. But some of the things that I think that from TUC that left an imprint on me, the opportunity to preach and the feedback that I got from preaching. When I left here, I was discerning whether to go, whether to stay in parish ministry or to pursue a PhD. And I think a significant piece in that discernment was some of the feedback I got here at TUC related to preaching in particular. And I feel more called to parish ministry as the years go by, even than, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 17 years ago. I think of something like the theology reading group, which I did there years ago, and I've done that on and off in the church that I currently serve, where we read a theology book on our own and gather to talk about it, or and also just the awareness of the church beyond the kind of local church, this awareness of being connected, and so I think, like in my community, I'm particularly, I would even say more so than most of the other pastors in my community, ecumenical, and seek to work with other faith communities, and really have engaged in a fair amount of interfaith work as well. That was not, I wouldn't attribute that solely to TUC, but that's certainly a part of that experience, is a sensitivity to other cultures, other faith traditions, that I treasure, and I think is actually core to my Christianity.
Yeah, thank you. Gail.
Well, currently I'm an intentional interim pastor at a Lutheran church. The ELCA is Lutheran, is big on interim positions, especially following long-term pastors. And so Randy and I've been doing that. I did do a settled call before taking this again, but we both enjoy the interim ministry. Randy's just finished, or is finishing up, his 13th intentional interim position. So it's kind of a rush, like international ministry. You go in and you work hard and you get to know people quickly on a different level, and then do your work and then leave. And so part of that, from being at the different international ministries, has helped us with that. I love the spirituality and the prayers that we had at TUC. And I certainly appreciate that. I loved listening to the Lord's Prayer, prayed in their native language. And for both of us, it was hard to come back and it just be spoken in one language. We miss that. As you said, the Pentecost part of it, of hearing their prayers in all the different languages. I have stoles made from obis. And so I get to tell the story of Tokyo Union when people look at them and say, oh, that's beautiful fabric. And then I get to tell the story of TUC and the people I knew there in God's ministry at TUC. We came to Tokyo following 3/11. So the earthquake, the tsunami, and the nuclear meltdown, that's when we came in of August of that year and to settle in. So we learned a lot that year. We listened to people, shared their grief, shared their fears, heard their fears, and discovered what was really important. And that we were able in those years that we were there to see people going from, Pepper shared it. This was a sad place, Gail, she said. And then it became happy over time with time. So we learned a lot from being with the people during those difficult times and how strong they were and how faithful. And so I carry that with me as well, too.
Yeah. So building off that, 3/11 was a very difficult time in Japan. And now globally, we've experienced the COVID-19 pandemic. And I am curious to see how coming to a country like Japan, where there has to be some cultural context learning and thinking on your feet, learning and adapting. What kind of resources did you mine from your experience at Tokyo Union Church? And did it have any effect during doing ministry or experiencing doing worship for this COVID-19 era that has so dramatically changed the ecclesial landscape?
Mm.
Well, I can go with that. So what I learned was there were some books that we shared with international pastors about the third culture kids. And maybe some of you are familiar with that genre of books and articles. And so it helped, as we had one child go with us to Europe. And so I did some studying with that and then shared it and realized it's not just about those who have lived in other countries, but shared it with our church camps because the youth and the counselors, after having been up on the mountain top literally and been a part of it, and then how difficult it was to come down, to come back and to enter, or when we had all the different young adult groups in the various international ministries we were in and had fabulous ministries internationally, where we shared, it was tight. And then they go back home and can't find that same feeling. And so there's a lot of examples. And certainly now with COVID, it's a different culture. And so those are some of the ideas that we have shared and make use of in speaking for the next, whatever cross-cultural part that we're participating in. And certainly we're not in hindsight yet with this COVID. And so we're still working our way through that.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. So connecting third culture kind of experiences that were experienced here in Japan and kind of synthesizing that with the kind of changing of cultures as we're going from a pre-COVID to COVID to a post-COVID or something like that.
Hopefully, God willing.
Yeah. Craig.
I really haven't thought about this too much, but when Gail mentions third cultures, in terms of TUC, and this is not so much in terms of the pandemic, but I do think it relates, which is the concept of being resident aliens. And there was a book that was by William Willimon and Stanley Hauerwas. We may have even read it in my theology reading group book there years ago, that talks about that as part of what the Christian vocation is about. It's being resident aliens. And I mean, I do think that's very much the case with TUC. It's very, very clearly a minority and a culture that is not predominantly Christian. And I think that awareness and model is increasingly important in other parts of the world, including in the US. And I think the pandemic it plays a part in that. That has a lot more than just the pandemic, but I think that awareness that the church should not presume to kind of be the dominant culture is something that I think is very important. But I haven't thought too much about how much TUC, what I learned in terms of, certainly I wouldn't say there are many technological techniques that I remember from 17 years ago. I mean, that was, I think, pre-iPhone, it was a different world. In Tokyo, that 18 years ago.
I can't speak so much to this subject because I don't think we have enough perspective yet on the ramifications of COVID on the churches. But I want to say some things about prayer, because in our instructions from Jonathan, prayer as an associate, you do most always the pastoral prayer, the corporate prayer. And so early on in my ministry, I wanted to do that well. And I did a lot of studying, and I found Harry Emerson Fosdick, his book on the meaning of prayer. And in it, he gave a lot of examples of public prayers at First Presbyterian Church in Manhattan when he was there. The book's still in print. It is a great book, and his pastoral prayers are fantastic. Anyway, I could talk about prayer because I've studied about every kind of prayer there is, led prayer groups, and another, Maxie Dunham, a Methodist, he wrote 2 workbooks, one on the meaning of prayer, living prayer, and one on intercessory prayer. And if you want to change people's lives at Tokyo Union Church, use those workbooks and to have prayer groups, especially living prayer. They're both fantastic. But after all this study and attending all kinds of meditation events, what I've come back to here at my 73rd year of life is prayer is more about being quiet than it is about speaking. And we've had a lot of challenges in our life here in New Jersey. And what I've learned is when I get quiet within myself and open myself, God always supplies me with what I need and gives me answers to things I'm struggling with and frustrated about. So prayer is really important. I think it's the most important Christian discipline.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much. And I thank you for recommending all these books, both Barbara and Craig. I think there could be helpful tools as we navigate as our ministry, reflecting on how God has moved in our life and the particular practices that we want to continue. And before we start to close this segment, I want to ask something on a less serious note. Encapsulating the spirit and humor, maybe. I'm known for a gregarious laugh. So, but one thing that I come to mind is coming to Japan must have been a culture shock for, I believe we're all here Americans in the United States. So I imagine living in Tokyo is very different from the context that we came from. But I wonder, not reflecting on the culture shock that experienced while you were here, but kind of the reverse culture shock. What are some of the things that that you experienced when you went back from after leaving Japan?
Well, we were very unhappy when we got to New Jersey. And most of my TUC friends that had come back in the New York area, they were very unhappy because, one, things work in Japan. Things just work. Trains are on time. You take your car in to be fixed, they'll fix it right, and they'll have it back to you whenever they say. Things work. Things don't work in America.
Yeah. All right. We have 2 more minutes, or 1 minute and 49 seconds. Craig and Gail.
I can go if you want. I bowed all the time at McDonald's when I got my Coke. Thank you. And then the other was driving. I got my driver's license while I was in Tokyo. And then back home at driving my sister's car, I kept turning on the windshield wipers rather than the turn signal, and had to think real hard which side of the street to turn on. And I laughed. She was a little nervous about me driving, but I laughed. All
right. And Craig?
I think I think I found the Japanese culture to be more respectful, just in general, in terms of how people, and I would almost say less loud. So, and I don't mean the noise level, but I mean, I don't even know what I mean, but like maybe more comfortable with silence, and I think it just, the United States feels like the volumes are turned up a little too much, and especially coming from Japan, it was like, let's breathe a little more and turn down the volume, maybe. So.
Oh, well, amen. This is thank you for all those experiences, and I can't wait to continue our conversation. I am certain that we will continue our conversation throughout the year as we celebrate 150. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a good evening or day or wherever you are.
Yeah. Omedetou gozaimasu. Congratulations to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.